With that, I'm going to turn it over, and when she gets done, we're going to have a little time for you all to ask her any questions that you have. So stay tuned and enjoy. So with that, welcome, President Novak.
Thanks so much, Diana. And let me just begin by welcoming all of you to the program here at Dakota Wesleyan. For many of you, you're already in it, but I haven't had a chance to meet you. So it's a real privilege for me to hear your stories. And let me just offer you prayers of courage and resiliency as you work through these programs amid life. And certainly can resonate with many of you who have children or just lots of other experiences happening that are making things sometimes more challenging. And so I just offer prayers of support for all of you as you navigate wherever your journey is taking you. And we hope to play a special part in that journey. And I hope you can look to our faculty and staff as resources and guides and mentors along the way. But we also, I think, learn from you. And so you offer us a lot of inspiration, and we appreciate the multitude of ways in which you are all serving, learning, and really adapting to new environments in your workplaces and modeling for us what leadership looks like, especially amid the crisis that we're all experiencing to some degree right now. And so I just want to thank you for being part of the program and for being here. As Diana mentioned, I've been really fortunate throughout my life to have had a number of different experiences. And so what I always share with people is doors open and opportunities emerge. And I encourage you to really seize those and network with people. And I'm going to share with you just a brief story, and it just sort of manifested itself this week about a connection that I had during my junior year of college. So I didn't go to Dakota Wesleyan, I was at another university, but during the summer of my junior and senior year, I served in a capacity as an intern, commodities trader intern. And I was buying and selling commodities initially out of the port at Houston, Texas. And then I was transferred to the Denver area and eventually traded on the Kansas Wheat Board. But during my time in Denver, one of the key ideas of this company I was working for was that we would go out and learn from the ground up the life of someone who was working in the commodities industry, so life in agriculture. And so they sent a really young 21-year-old who, while I had family that was on a farm, I can't tell you that I knew a whole lot about buying and selling commodities or cattle or whole cottonseed or anything. And they sent me out to a feedlot in Garden Springs, Kansas, or Garden City, Kansas, and told me to buy cattle. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I am really in way over my head. And so, you know, first of all, there aren't a lot of women buying cattle in Garden Springs, Kansas. And second of all, there are not a lot of 21-year-old women buying cattle. And third of all, I don't have a tremendous agriculture background. So I'm calling back to my manager and just saying, you know, I think I'm not really sure I should be doing this for the company, and I'm a little bit nervous about this. And he said, you know, you've gone through the training, you have the resources you need, you know, you're not gonna lose the ship here for us. Just go buy what we told you to buy. You need to buy, you know, 1,000 head of cattle. So anyway, I sat next to a gentleman. I thought, I got to look and scan sort of the livestock yard here. And so as I'm scanning this, there's a gentleman there who's got overalls on, and just older gentleman, looks a lot like my grandfather. And so I decided I am going to get to know this guy because he looks like he knows what he's doing. So I went and had a chance to get to meet this gentleman, and eventually I offered to take him to lunch, and then I just sort of explained very honestly and transparently my complete ignorance about what this company had sent me out to do, and could he help me. And he did, and he was very gracious, and he ended up being the 4th largest landowner in Western Kansas. And just last week, we've stayed in contact now 30 years later. He's 94 years old, and he sent $1,000 to Dakota Wesleyan to support what we're doing here. But it was a network that started years ago, and was opened by an opportunity of a manager who just said, hey, the person who normally would go buy this cattle is sick. We're going to send you out to do it. And what can you gain from it? So when that check came in, our development office said, does anyone know who this is? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I do. And it had been years since we had connected, but we had stayed in touch via Christmas cards and other sorts of yearly connection points. But not, you know, now at 94, he feels passionate about education and the opportunities he had. He also happened to buy stock in IBM and AT&T in 1964 when their value was under 5 cents a share, and eventually sold that. So he has tremendous wealth today, but he's been sharing it and giving it away. And I think it is just a testimony to the networks that we have opportunities to engage in. And so I'd encourage you to look at this group as a network and consider the ways in which you can continue to leverage the network to grow your own experiences, to learn from one another, and to leverage the partnerships that I think will form as you work collaboratively together. A little bit about my background. My husband Ken and I were married right out of college. We're proud parents to 8 children, 2 of whom we've adopted from South Africa, so we have a transracial family. Our oldest is 24 and our youngest is 12, and so we have kids in 6th grade all the way up through 2 that have just graduated from college. I have 3 in college right now, and some in high school and middle school, and so just about everywhere, but they keep us very busy. Ken served in the US military for 13 years before being medically discharged, and so we had opportunities to live overseas, and had a wonderful network of friends and family members that evolved through all of our military connections as well. So we're grateful for those experiences. And before I landed at Dakota Wesleyan, I held 8 different positions because we moved every 18 months. And so I often tell people, never be afraid to try new things. And it's that combination of networks over multitudes of different opportunities that I think have continued to open doors for us here at Dakota Wesleyan and have offered a great deal of inspiration to me over the years, as struggles emerge, as joyful events take place, as moments of challenge are emerge. Those folks have been people who've offered the witness and wisdom of Christ, and continue to be really solid mentors, even though they come from a variety of different sectors and industries. So tonight, Diana asked me to share just a little bit with you about leadership amid crisis, and to just share a little bit of my thoughts and perspectives on that. And so I'll keep that to about 10 minutes, and then I'll open it up for questions. One of the things that some of our students who've been here recently may have heard me speak about is one of the symbols of Dakota Wesleyan from its origin was a tumbleweed. And in fact, in our alma mater, the last line of the alma mater is, "Who doesn't love the spot where the tumbleweed grows?" Now, the tumbleweed is actually a seed that was imported in the flaxseed bags of new immigrants to this region from the Ukraine and parts of Russia. And so it's not a native seed. And I'm mindful that as a university community, we are always opening doors to people of all backgrounds and all experiences to open their doors of possibility in much the same way that that early tumbleweed arrived in South Dakota. Not native to the region, but willing to plant itself here and committed to contributing to the region. Now, I mentioned that I grew up in an agricultural family, and the tumbleweed would not have been their favorite weed. In fact, they would have sprayed it, they would have pitched it, they would have cussed it out, they would have said a lot of things about it. They would have certainly not used it as a leadership analogy. But I want to share with you just a little bit why I think it may work. And so, unlike any other weed, okay, the tumbleweed is rather interesting in that when it forms, when it begins to bloom, it's actually a beautiful purple flower. And it looks like a pasque or just a wildflower, a real purple wildflower. And it will bloom for upwards of 2 to 3 months in the pastures or wherever they may be growing. And after it blooms, it begins to actually, not unlike the bamboo, that's when it actually produces its most growth, is after it actually has bloomed. And so it's like it gets a surge of energy in death. And this energy begins to create what you see when you see a tumbleweed, are these large prickly branches. And it actually cannot spread its seeds until it dies. And when it dies, it becomes this sort of large, weedy looking dead bush. And it will break off from its roots and it will begin to tumble across the prairie. It will get caught in barbed wire fences. It will get caught under your car. It will get caught around hay bales. It will get caught in the garbages. But it constantly seems to manage to work its way over obstacles and keep moving. And as it moves, it spreads its seeds. So when we think about leadership, I often encourage our teams here at Dakota Wesleyan that sometimes we have to remember leadership is not about who we are. It's sometimes dying to our own ego or dying to ourselves so that collectively we have more capacity to propel our organizations forward, our churches forward, our mission forward, our ministry forward. It's not about us. It's about this larger whole. And so I think the tumbleweed is an apt metaphor in that respect. I also think the tumbleweed offers a sense of how to be resilient, right? It gets caught. It encounters obstacles. And it works its way over the barbed wire fence. It works its way over the hay bale so that it continue to plant seeds, often in barren locations where it takes years before the right conditions emerge for things to blossom and bloom. And so much like the work that we all do, we're planting seeds. We're planting seeds of hope. We're planting seeds of leadership. We're planting seeds of financial literacy. We're planting seeds of commitment. We're planting seeds of knowledge, of appreciation of diversity. And sometimes those seeds do not see their fruition. They don't come to fruition. They aren't watered like we need them to be watered. They don't receive the fertilizer they need to receive for a while. And so we have to be patient. And so leadership requires patience. It requires that understanding that we have to be resilient. Even amid crisis, things don't happen. And we have to be adaptive. We have to be agile. We have to respond to the conditions around us. And sometimes we have to look in other places or for different approaches to solutions as problems present themselves. And then finally, I would say the other powerful piece of the tumbleweed is that what's most notable, if you go, I pick these things up all the time. I make my husband pull over on the side of the road and I'm like, hold on, that's a really good tumbleweed. So we go put them in the back end of our truck. But is you typically never find a tumbleweed unless it has other things in it, okay? So a tumbleweed picks up things as it tumbles across the prairie. It picks up other species. It picks up insects, it picks up debris, right? And so if we think of our role as leaders, who are we picking up? Who are we adding to our teams? How are they complementing who we are and what we do? Those are the kinds of things that I think at the heart of a Dakota Wesleyan education, at the heart of the Master's in Education program, the Nonprofit Church Leadership program, or the MBA program, we are about cultivating leaders who have the spirit of the tumbleweed, who understand that it's about not just ourselves, but a bigger picture, that dying to what our own ego might be so that we can encourage others to live, having a certain humility to our leadership. It is about resiliency and courage. It is about taking in people who might not be native to our region, but who offer diverse perspectives, who offer diversity to our teams so that we can be stronger in what we do. And it is fundamentally about the resiliency, the patience, and the persistence to work and adapt to new environments, to new situations as they present themselves. And it is about planting seeds, seeds of hope, seeds of opportunity, seeds of innovation, seeds that encourage others to grow and develop within all of our organizations as well. So it's a privilege to be with you tonight and to share what we see as the tumbleweed of leadership, but what I hope is an inspirational metaphor for you as you're journeying on this program, that you open doors to new opportunities for people and that you consider yourself a leader in the spirit of the tumbleweed. Any questions?
So Amy, I remember thinking that my college president was this untouchable person who had never had anything fun and interesting happen in their life because they were the president and they're by definition stodgy and old and boring. But I want our students to know that you're not that person and that you are probably one of the most entertaining, active presidents they could ever hope to have. And so I was wondering if you could share with us a story of your choosing and or the story of when you took your children home from Germany, because that story, even though you told it to me probably 12 years ago, still makes me giggle when I think about it. So I'm just wondering if you could share that story and then perhaps another one, because I think it really shows that the experiences that you've had along the way have influenced your leadership style and given you the grit and the resilience to carry on in the face of COVID and whatever else is coming at us.
Yes. So you can't be a mom to 8 and not be humbled every single day, right? So, you know, you're making mistakes and you're never right when you have that many teenagers. And so there's a constant reminder of what you're not just by innate nature of having teenagers. Who, by the way, I was so pleased that my sophomore in college, who's in Indiana, called and said, you know, Mom, I think in 7th grade when you told me this, there was actually some truth in that. I'm like, amen, you know, 6 years later, we're coming to that realization. That's great. So as Diana mentioned, we had the privilege of serving, my husband had the privilege of serving in the military. And so we were really moving. We did 10 moves in our first 13 years. So we moved a lot. And Ken was, endured some pretty significant medical challenges while we were living in Germany. This is at the start of the Second Iraq War. And so it became pretty clear that after being treated in the German hospitals, he was going to have to be medevaced back to the States. And so he was medevaced back to the States to a specialty hospital in San Antonio, Texas, to undergo a fair degree of neurological treatment. Ken was a speechwriter for the 4-star general and the NATO headquarters that was overseeing. He's a very bright guy. Lost his ability to speak at one point and lost movement on the right side of his body. So became really very impaired during our time over in Germany. And I had 6 kids, the oldest of which was 7. And so after it became clear that he wasn't going to really make it, we decided make it in the military and we were going to need to be he was going to be medically retired. I flew back with our children from Germany. And so I don't know if any of you have, you know, dreams of that nightmare experience where you wake up out of bed, but I still have this sort of nightmare wake up moment where it was like 10 hours on a flight with, 6 kids, all under the age of 7. And just the looks from every single person on the plane, like, oh, please don't have her sit next to me. Oh, please don't have her sit next to me as I'm hauling in children in car seats and everything else. As you can imagine, it's a 10-hour flight. So anyway, doing what a mom does, I'm packing food and just everything to entertain my children for this long flight from Frankfurt to Detroit, and then Detroit to Minneapolis, and then Minneapolis into Sioux Falls, where my parents were going to pick me up, and I was going to move back home with all these kids for the first time, you know, in 14 years. And so, so our adopted children, Mark and Samela, are right in the middle of our biological children. So at the time, Peter was 7, and then we had a 6-year-old and a 5-year-old, and then Mark and Samela were 3 and 2, and then Mariana had just been born, and she was about 6 months old at the time. And so they're young, they're very young. But Mark and Samela are originally from South Africa, and they're very animated and very, they love life, and they have a lot of energy and rhythm. And so they're singing most of the time, and, you know, we're just trying to hold it together, and I'm giving them food to be quiet because people are trying to sleep, and it's an overnight air flight. Anyway, we get there, and we have a tight connection because we didn't leave Frankfurt on time. And so we have very tight connections. So I'm hauling out strollers. My 7-year-old has a stroller. I have a stroller. I have a front pouch on with a child, and I have a backpack on with my 2-year-old. And so it's kind of a sight. And we get through the first, this is shortly after 9/11, right? So we're doing a lot of security checking. So we get through the first group, and the guy says, you need to go over into the agricultural inspection line. So we went over to the agricultural inspection line. That means they take apart everything you have, and they have to go through all your baggage and make sure that you have nothing, you know, that you have there. Well, Mark has stuffed half the peanut butter sandwich in his pocket, and that is what is triggering the agricultural inspection. And so we had to take everything out, emptied out his pockets. They finally clear us. We get through, and now we have to send all the kids through the regular, what looks to be like the TSA efforts now. So I'm sending them one at a time, the oldest first. So seven, you know, Peter goes, then Isaac goes, then Luke goes. And then Mark, again, who's just kind of a jokester, even at 3, goes through, and he's Black, right? But he's growing up in a white household. We haven't had a lot of exposure to diversity at this juncture. And so the gentleman on the other side says, hey, you come here, brother. And Mark says, no, I am not your brother. I'm not coming here. And I'm like, no, time out. You need to go there. He's being nice to you. Let's get through that line. Anyway, long story short, we made it. But there have been those kinds of experiences in retrospect. I always say things can get kind of bad. I'm not sure they got quite as hairy as they did on the aircraft from Frankfurt to Detroit. But we've had health challenges with a number of our children. We've been near death with a couple. We've had experiences that have certainly reminded me that it takes a world to raise children, and it takes a world to help us through life. And I'm grateful for the friends and the family and the countless individuals who've actually stepped in at really critical times and just said, let me help you out. And this gentleman in the Detroit airport, who my son didn't want to go to because he wasn't his brother, took Mark and just grabbed him by the hand and helped the rest of us all the way through and expedited us to the Minneapolis terminal so that we could catch the flights to get to the next destination. So we've been privileged to have a lot of really positive experiences, but those positive experiences have happened because people have stepped out of their way to help us. And so I take an attitude each and every day of what can we do here at Wesleyan to be a resource, to be a help, to offer the same sort of support to others that they did to us. So that's all to say, I do like to have fun. I do appreciate our students. We're rather informal. When students come over to our house, we hang out because we can't clean the house constantly. As you can imagine, we have lots of chaos around there. I have a sock pile that rivals most mountains, ski mountains. It's not matched. I'm really grateful. Unmatched socks are no longer in, and unmatched shoes are not in. So are in. So, you know, we're popular, even though we didn't ever intend to be. So there's a lot of really positive things we've learned in life, but I am inspired daily by our students, by the faculty and staff who commit to the ministry of being here at Wesleyan and doing what they do. So that's a long story, Diana, sorry.
Well, you left out the part about the escalator.
What happened on the escalator?
Didn't you have an escalator or a stroller get away from you on the escalator?
Oh, we did. Yes, we did. We lost a stroller on the escalator. We had, yeah, that's right. It was a chaotic trip.
See, it made an impact on me. I heard it how many years ago, and I still remember.
Yeah. I forgot that minor detail. We did. We had a stroller that got lost. It went flying down the escalator. We had to recover it. Children damaged in the process. It wasn't my best day.
But you got everybody home safely. So
everyone arrived safely.
Yes.
Yeah.
You. Okay.
Yeah.
So everybody else, what questions do you have for the president? Comments, thoughts? Unmute yourself. Share with us. Y'all don't realize that but Amy is the president who walks around campus, and she can't go from point A to point B without people stopping her to talk. So this is unusual that no one's talking to her. So this is your shot.
Did you ever think you would be the president of a school?
No. It's a real privilege to do that. So I actually started here as in 2004 as a part-time grant writer, and 9 years later, I was named their president. So I really just started in an effort to do something because Ken had been medically retired and was clearly not going to be in a position to work. And so I needed to do something, and thought I would do it for about 3 months till I got my feet on the ground and found something else. And I really fell in love with higher education and the ministry and the work that's involved in it. And so it's been a privilege to continue to do that as we go forward.
I have something for you. This is
Sure.
Jeremy White. Unless someone else is ready. I made that trip back and forth to Frankfurt quite a few times, being in the Air Force.
Sure.
And you've talking about resiliency quite a bit. And we're having a big resiliency push. And some of the groups are getting together to do little icebreakers, as you will, or, you know, just stuff to strengthen each other mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, all these different things. And we're having a resiliency day tomorrow. So through all these endeavors you've been in through, it sounds like you've been through a lot with the military and traveling and different jobs. What are some of the biggest resiliency attributes or takeaways that you can pass along to us?
That's a great question. And I think it probably differs for each individual, but I do think there's a really important point in, for me, nurturing myself spiritually really matters. And so there's a routine to that every morning that sort of just grounds my soul. And I really feel strongly about not excluding that from my day. I would tell you that I also think just carving out time for yourself is important, even among our busy, busy lives. And sometimes I think moms and dads of young parents and parents of any, I mean, we get caught in the hustle of go do this and this and this and be at this activity and this activity. And we often neglect the care that we need to give ourselves. So whether that's exercise or taking just time for silence or whatever that might be, I think it's important that we continue to nurture ourselves in this process. And then I think, frankly, humor has been a critical component for me in resiliency. And so I laugh a lot. My husband and I laugh a lot. We find humor each day in something. And I think that's a critical part of keeping perspective. I had the privilege of doing my doctoral work at Creighton. One of the practices they have there involves a sort of a tradition, a religious tradition called doing an examen. And one of the exercises as part of that is to really look through and say, what did I not do well today? What did I do well? And what am I grateful for? And so for the past 8 or 9 years, I do that nightly. And when you end in gratitude, I think it always helps recalibrate you for where you're headed next. And so it's always a way to end the day. And I wake up the next morning with a reminder of what that gratitude was that I offered from the day before. What did I learn the day before? And what do I want to correct that I felt I maybe didn't do well? And I think that practice really helps us to be reflective. I worked at one point for a company out of India, and a very interesting experience with them. Again, we were living in Boston at the time, and I was, this was a large multinational, and I was going in asking them to do some brainstorming and really generate ideas to solve this particular business process re-engineering problem we were working on. And the gentleman in the back row, you know, as a facilitator, you sometimes have these moments, not unlike 3 minutes ago, where everyone's quiet and no one's asking anything. And so as a teacher, you want to say, okay, Melissa or Amy or Tristan, you know, calling on them. You want to get them to respond. And so naturally, a brainstorming exercise is trying to get people to respond. And the gentleman in the back row made a really profound comment. And he said, look, in India, we brain still first before we brainstorm. And it's been one of those really critical life lessons for me. Like sometimes just taking time to still, to calm ourselves and carving out time to do that is really critical. And I have found even in the daily deluge of issues on campus with COVID-19 and the political, the racial environment that's present on college campuses and the racial issues, the host of constituencies that universities serve, you can become very worn down in the day-to-day. And I find even taking a calming walk, just 5 minutes around part of the campus or 10 minutes around part of the campus more frequently has really been a way for me to just still my brain. And it means that my reaction to things is less, I'm less reactionary, I'm more thoughtful. And I think it's just a process of inner healing that can be occurring all day long if we're mindful of that. So mindfulness, really nurturing the soul, and I think taking time for brain stilling, in whatever form that looks like for you, have certainly been critical elements of resiliency. And I think perspective, I almost lost a husband and I almost lost a child. Those are very tough things. Many of you may have lost someone very close to you. I think that offers a constant perspective for all of us.
Those are all very good. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm. How about all of you? What do you find challenging in life these days? I'm going to have to start calling on you, and you can't answer brain stilling.
Amy, I'll kind of say something that's challenging that I've faced. Me being just being in the workforce for 1 year and being out of college and whatnot, but still taking master's classes. One thing that I've found challenging that I know I've talked with a couple of coworkers and peers too is with the kind of environment that we're in with the pandemic going on and whatnot, it's hard to sometimes stay motivated and on top of your stuff when you're working from home with distractions and whatnot, or just trying to find the motivation, when you're in your kitchen or living room working, your 8-hour day or whatnot, but then also wanting to put in the work for your schoolwork and whatnot. So I've kind of seen, a drop off in motivation for myself. I've been able to get it back a little bit lately, but I know it's something that I've struggled with, and other people I've talked to have struggled with as well. So I don't know if that's something you guys have run into. Obviously, with school starting, it's a little bit nicer and a little bit of a change. But with the day-to-day stuff, I've found it hard to be a little bit more motivated than I have in the past.
Was that you, Jason?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yep. I think that's a really astute observation. I think that you are not alone in those feelings. One of two things seems to be happening. People are working remotely. They're used to that contact with other people. And so that's been a really hard shift. There's a sense of almost isolation or trying to work and you're not sure what the ends are and things are changing so rapidly, and what you started work on, you're not completing because you had to adapt quickly. The flip side of which has been, it's been so much change and so much adaptation that people have burned out. So I've kind of heard both of those different narratives, and I think that it certainly has been perhaps more challenging than in any time in your lifetime or in many of our lifetimes, because what we experienced is really unprecedented. So I think it's about keeping your goals in front of you and being mindful of what you're driving to achieve. And for some people, it's just mindful, what is it that I need to accomplish today? And how do I get through today? And then how do I set that goal for the next day? But I agree with you. I think that this has been a particularly challenging time.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go. So I had a major medical situation a couple years ago, and looking back at that and seeing all of I'll say all the things I want to do. So whether it's, following my kids or going to work or going for a run, trying this program, there's all these things I want to do. And I find that the stamina or the wherewithal, and maybe it's because I'm getting older too, I don't know, but just being able to kind of balance all of that stuff that, fulfills me and makes me happy and all of that, because we only get this one life, right? So just kind of balancing all of that and realizing that, gosh, maybe not everything has to be done today. I can maybe save something for tomorrow.
Yeah, I think there's some spiritual writers who talk about the difference between perfection and presence. And I think that what you're speaking of is sometimes we just, especially as women and as moms, occasionally we get we beat up on ourselves like, oh, the house doesn't look this and this, we can be really critical. And so sometimes I think it's just is it better to be present or perfect? And I think presence should probably always win out, but it's hard. I completely agree with you, and I appreciate that comment.
I think I just started doing my practicum in the Dakota Wesleyan classroom, which is just a thrill for me. One of the difficulties is not seeing faces. I've got 18 students and I just want to pull those little masks right off of them. I know they need to be there for their safety, but I miss those faces. And I find it really difficult to communicate, what are they thinking? And I'm just staring holes through them, trying to read them. So I miss faces.
I had to ask students last week, I'm like, you got to give me the thumbs up, the thumbs down, or like I don't know about this situation, because it is definitely harder when you can't see the faces. So I empathize with that.
Well, I think we'll probably stop there. I just know from experience that if you have a burning question for Amy, please just reach out and let her know. She's very student responsive. I consider her the most student-centered president of anybody I've ever seen. So, and I've done a lot of time in school. So with that, Melissa, do you have anything to add?
I'd just like to thank everyone for coming tonight, and I so appreciate you stopping in, Amy, and speaking to the group. It really means a lot to us. Kind of bouncing off what Angie said, it was so nice to have the students back on campus and to actually be able to see people and be with people. And so I've been really thankful for that lately. I think that's kind of done a lot for the motivation factor. And I've enjoyed having them back on campus and seeing everyone via the Teams meetings and the Zoom meetings that we've been able to do as well.
And this is great, getting faces with names. This is really nice.
It's a little Greg. Greg isn't giving up yet. He's not going to go down. He's got more energy than the moms. So Amy, thank you again. Thank you so much for taking an hour out of your busy week.
It's been my pleasure. And as Diana said, and Melissa alluded to, I'm happy to help make connections for you. So whether it's connections or answering questions or, in ways that whatever can be meaningful, I appreciate and value the opportunity to interact with our students. So please don't hesitate to reach out, to ask for help or to offer suggestions. We improve because of what you tell us and how you share with us. So certainly appreciate you being part of our program. Thank you for courageously doing this. For many people, it's been 20 years. It's hard to go back. I empathize with you. I did the same thing and thought, what am I doing? But I think you're making a conscious effort to invest in yourself. And that's a really critical investment that will pay long-lasting dividends. I think you're modeling lifelong learning. And in our world today, that's a really critical investment in yourself and in your organizations and the places you serve and work and how you live. So thanks for joining us tonight.
Okay, well, that's all we have. So thank you so much. And feel free to reach out anytime. If you haven't tried calling on Teams yet, it's so much fun. You just find somebody and click the little dial button and there you are, you're talking to people. So